You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
All right, family, it's the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here with Frank Tucker, and we are representing, of course, for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals Network. Make sure you follow us on all platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Frank, the big news this weekend is a story that you broke, which was basically that Jason Candle is at the top of the list as far as offensive coordinator possibilities for the Miami Hurricanes football program. Now, this is a guy who is a head coach currently at Toledo. He's basically a Toledo guy. He kind of came up through the ranks at Toledo. Actually just signed a new deal as well. So a lot of people are speculating as to why he's being, he's a top level candidate here. So, Frank, what do you know about the situation and what should we expect?
Well, they've been in negotiations this week. The extension that he got, he's actually getting paid less than he was in his previous contract. So he sacrificed some money on this extension for some longevity on this new extension. But he was in contention for this job last year. It's something that he did consider, right? And I think Jason Candle is a guy that wants to move up in the ranks. He's 43 years old. He's been at Toledo for an extended period of time. He's been the head coach there since the end of the 2015 season, replacing Matt Campbell, who ended up moving on to Iowa State. Right? He's coached with some really good coaches during his time. Nick Sirianni was a guy that moved from Mount Union onto grander pastures, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the same type of tree where he comes from, right? So he has dreams of grandeur. Every college coach does, and as much as people want to say being a head coach is more important than money is definitely a priority to where you work in this world. And if he's able to make close to $2 million a year working for the University of Miami, that's something that he is going to consider. Now, there's no guarantee that he's going to take this job, but the fact that there's been extensive conversations and rumors that he's been in South Florida at the end of this week it makes me feel like it's pretty much set in stone that he's going to end up being that guy. I know he runs the type of scheme Mario wants. There's a really good balance to what he brings to his offense. He's done a really good job in recruiting. He's done well in the portal. We've seen him go after R.J. Delancey, who was a Miami Northwestern defensive back, pulled him out of Nebraska. He's had some NFL players like Kareem Hunt, Deontay Johnson, who plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. So he's got a pedigree offensively. It's just he's in the MAC, right? We know the MAC on every year-to-year basis can change, but overall, he's one of the better offensive minds in college football, and he does exactly what Mario wants him to do. It would bring somebody that can communicate with the rest of the staff in a way that Josh Gaddis really didn't do well when he was here.
I hear you, and I am convinced that maybe this could be the guy. But I know a lot of Miami Hurricanes fans aren't. When they hear a name like Jason Candle, they're like, who's that? It's not the big splash hire. It's not the Ken Dorsey. It's not the James Coley or even a Marcus Arroyo, who we thought would be in line for this type of job, given his relationship with Coach Cristobal. So the questions that come up for me is like, can he recruit South Florida? Can he recruit Florida, period? And Toledo, like holy Toledo, like it's in the MAC, like, come on, man. Like Miami destroyed this team a couple of consecutive years ago. I believe it was under Al Golden, if I'm not mistaken.
I was actually under Mark Richt, 2017 and 2018.
Okay.
And Miami destroyed him, but they destroyed him defensively. right?
Yeah.
This team scored 24 and 30 points against the Miami Hurricanes with a lot lesser talent. And to answer the question on if he can recruit South Florida, he made South Florida a priority. He hired Kevin Beard, who's a South Florida guy. He coached at the University of Miami. He would be an interesting candidate for the wide receivers coach position. I know you and I will probably talk about that, but he's somebody that can recruit. He's a head coach. He knows what goes into recruiting a whole entire offense and not just a single position group that a lot of candidates that Miami, might be looking at would probably be, right? I know Scott Frost is a name everybody brings up. There are background issues there that are not going to allow that to happen. That's why he's not getting a job anywhere. Cliff Kingsbury's not taking this job, right? Marcus Arroyo, people talking about Marcus Arroyo over Jason Candle. Jason Candle is the better option of him and Marcus Arroyo. Marcus Arroyo got fired from his, mid-major group of five type job comparative to Jason Candle, who's had a consistent winning pedigree during his time.
UNLV, though, not exactly a fertile ground compared to Ohio as far as recruiting. So I think kind of tough of a comparison there to compare him getting fired from UNLV, which has never won anything in football. The last time they won something was in basketball back in those days. Like football, it's kind of hard to compare, but go ahead.
They have Grandmama. They had Grandmama on the team, right?
Yeah.
Larry Johnson.
I thought you didn't know about basketball, but look at you, man. Look at you. They had Grandmama in those days. They sure did. Good old Larry Johnson. But
but listen, I get what you're saying with Marcus Arroyo. The relationship is there. We know he's run a Power 5 offense in the past. With Jason Candle, there is no pedigree of him being able to say, I ran a Power 5 offense. I've recruited at a Power 5 level. He was a Mount Union coach that went to Toledo, stayed at Toledo, and has been nowhere else, right? He played at Mount Union immediately after his playing career, went into coaching at Mount Union. But he's won everywhere he's been. And I think there's an attitude, there is a mentality that goes into being part of winning programs that needs to be implemented into this program. And I think that Mario Cristobal needs a guy that he can trust in his offense to get the job done. And it's obvious that Jason Candle's been a guy for 2 years now, that he is somebody that Mario trusts. He was the number one guy on the board last year before it went down to Tommy Reese and Josh Gaddis, right? And now we're seeing it happen once again. They're getting into deeper discussions. There haven't really been any viable candidates that have come up in discussion amongst anybody, right? We're talking about Doug Nussmeier, like quarterback coach for the Cowboys, who nobody wants. All right, Marcus Arroyo, there hasn't really been any movement on him getting an interview for the job. It's just really speculation on if Mario would just go after somebody that he knows, because we know familiarity is something that's important to him with guys like Alex Maribel, Joe Salavea, Frank Ponce. So I could see those being fits, but I just like the Jason Candle thing just because it's not the sexy hire, right? So the expectations aren't going to be like crazy at first. There's going to be kind of that honeymoon period of feeling out who Jason Candle is. But I like the balance that he brings to his offense. He's had NFL quarterbacks in the past at Toledo. Logan Woodside put up huge numbers at Toledo, along with Kareem Hunt. So they had a 4,000-yard passer with a 1,400-yard back, right? They've had every year he's had a running back rush for double-digit touchdowns. Every year he's had a quarterback throw for either 3,000 yards or over 300 yards per game. There's production to be had in this Jason Candle offense, and I think that Mario, with the type of personnel that he's bringing in, especially along the offensive line and at running back, he wants that balance. Everybody wants a high octane spread offense of air raid concepts, doing all the things that needs to be done to throw for 4,500 yards and have a quarterback be in contention for a Heisman.
Right.
But you don't have a quarterback or a receiver room that is conducive to that happening. So what is the strength of this team right now? The trenches, the newly developing trenches. You bring in Javion Cohen, you bring in Matt Lee, right? You have Zion come back, right? You bring in 3 blue chip offensive lineman recruits in the 2023 class, 2 of them as the top 2 rated 2 out of 3 rated offensive linemen in the country, right? So everything is built around the run game, in my opinion, right now. Mark Fletcher, you and I have seen in person, is in the conversation, or should be, for the top running back in the country, just based on size, speed. He has progressed as a receiver. Chris Johnson, we've seen that explosive skill set against Central, Shaman Amadana, St. Thomas Aquinas, right? Ely, who was a top 100 team in the country this year at one point. He's done it time and time again as an explosive receiver and running back for Dillard High School, who played a very, very competitive schedule this year. So I think the two best options are to run the football, and that doesn't even include Henry Parrish or Javante Citizen. You have upwards of 4 guys that could be impact college running backs at the University of Miami. We don't know what Tyler Van Dyke is right now. We've seen highs, we've seen real low lows. We don't know what Jakari Brown is yet. And it might be better for Jakari Brown to be in a Jason Candle offense where he doesn't have to be the whole show. So I love this potential hire. I think it's a good fit. I like that Mario is going after a guy that he is on and not who the fans want. And for me, that's why I'm good with it.
I mean, it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun to kind of see all of this happen because just like you said, it's not a sexy hire. It's more like, this is like maybe a 7, not an 8 or a 9. Like if
this is the one you marry. This is the one you marry. Right. This isn't the one you date.
Yeah, this is like the 7 with the great personality. She's got a great career. She's got ambition, that type of thing. But she's not going to win any runway model, probably.
There we go.
Awards type of thing.
It's a crazy hot matrix. It's a crazy hot matrix, right? If you get a 10, right, you're probably going to get a 10 crazy, right? But if you hit that 7, you might get like that 3 to 5 range crazy. Yeah. I don't want 3 to 5 range. I want 3 to 5 range crazy. I don't want 8 to 10 crazy, right? Because then 8 to 10 crazy is Josh Gaddis, right? Where we're looking at games where we don't score touchdowns, right? He was a Broyles Award winner, right? He coached at Alabama. He recruited South Florida really well. He got Jerry Jeudy. He was part of the recruitment of a number of 5-star receivers. Then he went to Michigan, grabbed a bunch of big-time recruits, was the offensive coordinator, went to the college football playoff. That resume was a sexy hire, and look how that worked. So for me, I'd rather Mario get the guy that he wants because Gaddis was not the original number 1 option for him. He took him because he felt like it was going to help him win the press conference, in my opinion. And I felt like he was the 3rd option amongst those, the Tommy Reeses, the Jason Candles. And it didn't work out. I want Mario to get his number 1 guy. If you have to make him the highest paid offense coordinator in college football, you do just that. And on top of that, you need leadership on this team outside of Mario Cristobal. Kevin Steele's an older guy right now. We know what he's going to bring to the table. You have a lot of dysfunction on the staff right now. What would be the biggest addition to the staff? Bring in a second head coach. Bring in another guy who can take some of that responsibility off Mario's plate. Put a head coach into that offensive room so he can be the guy that communicates and commands that room amongst the Alex Maraballs, the Kevin Smiths, whoever you bring in as a wide receivers coach and potentially quarterbacks coach. Because it looks like Jason Candle, right, could end up being in that Josh Gaddis role where he's coaching the receivers and Pop Cooney ends up helping as an analyst, and then you just bring in a quarterback coach. So, like, if you can bring in a James Coley or somebody along those lines, I think that's a benefit. I think it's a benefit to have a guy with the experience of commanding a locker room and also helping lead a program.
I sure hope you're right, Frank, because if you're not, I'm going to be that pessimistic Hurricane fan, because if you're not, potentially you've eaten maybe 3 huge contracts in the past couple of years. If, say it doesn't work out and you have to fire Jason Candle after 1 year, just like you did Josh Gaddis, then you've eaten basically 3 contracts if you count Manny Diaz as well, So you can't really afford to miss right here. You cannot afford to miss because I think Coach Cristobal is clearly not on the hot seat right now. But if
He's
this
got a
is a
10-year
miss,
contract. He's got a 10-year contract.
I'm
I don't
sorry,
think he
bro.
can be on the hot seat until
If
like
this is
5 or 6 years in.
if this is a miss, trust me, he is on the hot seat. If this is another 5-7 season, he's going to be on the hot seat. I mean, it may not be realistic from a financial standpoint, but he'd definitely be on the virtual hot seat. Let's just say that, because you just can't miss. You can't miss 2 years in a row on an offensive coordinator. Usually you don't fire an offensive coordinator after year one, especially when you bring in the guy. If this wasn't your guy that you brought in, then I understand. You gave him a chance 1 year and it didn't work out. But this guy you brought in, this was your boy from Alabama, and now you're bringing your boy from Toledo and hoping that he is the answer. I tell you what, the other thing is that this is not a high powered offense. We're going to see, just like you said, it's going to be uh it's going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust, which is not exciting football these days. It's not exciting for the fans, and when that doesn't work, it falls flat, literally, right? If this offensive line is not as good as we think, and if this offensive line goes through injuries again, because they're not deep, because you lost John Campbell, and you lost Ja'Kai Clark. So those are two players who started for you last year, and then you lost DJ Scaife to graduation. So this is not a deep group, I would say, unless these younger players like a Matthew McCoy really pops. That's your only chance. Like a Matthew McCoy really pops, or like a Lawrence Seymour really kind of takes that next step. Then you legitimately have a deep offensive line. But this team is just another few injuries away from being not good again. Even if the scheme is great, or even if this guy Candle lights a fire literally on this team. So I'm still hesitant. I'm still a little, reluctant to be all excited about it. Based on what you said, I'm kind of sold that he could be the guy. But, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, spring is not a very good indicator to me of what the team will actually look like against other football teams. I think spring is more of an indicator of also which young guys are really taking the next step. Are we going to see a Cyrus Moss take the next step? Those type of guys. Are we going to see Nigel Lee Kelly take another big step?
Everything I've heard on Najee too. Everything I've heard on Najee is he's going to be in contention for a starting job this year. That Jafari Harvey needs to be watching his back, because Najee Kelly is coming. Kelly is coming, and he wants it. He wants it. And the crazy thing about it is he's going to be 18 years old this upcoming season. He's going to be his second year of college football, and he's going to be 18 years old. He is just coming into his own. I try to tell people, if Nigel Kelly came back for one more season of high school football, he's arguably in the conversation for the #1 defensive end in the country. That's how talented Nigel Kelly is, right? He was a 17-year-old freshman that was producing in a three-way rotation, in a three-level rotation for the University of Miami last year. If there was one position group that was not an issue last year, it was the defensive line. They did an excellent job from the interior all the way to the outside guys rushing the passer. And we saw a progression from what Manny Diaz did to guys just rushing upfield to getting sack production without sacrificing gap integrity. So I think Kevin Steele did a good job. I think there's going to be a lot of those guys that you talked about, young players that Mario Cristobal recruited in 2022 that are going to bounce back this year and really have big seasons. I think we're going to see an even bigger jump for Wesley Bissainthe. And then I kind of disagree with you on the depth, though, man. I think a lot of the places that they had issues with depth last year, they're not going to have those same issues, right? I think if there's injury issues, wide receiver is the only position that I think you would still might have an issue, right? You still might have an issue. But with what Jason Candle is bringing in on offense, I don't think the offense is as reliant on receivers as it was in the last offense. I know everybody was mad that it was a run-centric offense under guidance, but it was all timing routes. It was full field read. That means you have to have receivers that are able to do those type of things. I don't think it's going to be like that under Jason Campbell. I think it's going to be simplifying things through a play action passing attack that's going to make things easier for Tyler Van Dyke once again. And I think that one of the things that Mario Cristobal is going to learn from in his first year is making sure that his offensive coordinator has a relationship with Tyler Van Dyke throughout the year and not just when things go wrong. So that's something that I think is going to be fixed very early on. I think that the depth at running back is going to be huge. I think Chris Johnson is going to add an element as a receiver as well to help with that depth. I think that this offensive line is deep. When you have upwards of 8 guys that are going to be in contention for starting jobs, including freshmen, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. There's guys on this team that showed that they can be depth pieces in case of injury, right? Lawrence Seymour is a guy you mentioned. Mario Cristobal spoke about him specifically at times, saying that he was a guy that busted his butt, got in position despite not being what they necessarily want from a physical standpoint, right? You bring in Jonathan Dennis from Oregon. He's another guy that's going to help. Logan Sagapolo is another guy who's going to help for interior depth. You have depth at offensive tackle. It's not this year where if Zion Nelson is not the guy, you're in trouble. You got Samson Okunlola right behind him, or Francis Mauagoa right behind him, right? Javion Cohen can play pretty much any position along the offensive line. I love what this offensive line is going to look like next year. I have total faith that Mario Cristobal and Alex Maribal are going to have that side of the offense on point throughout the entire year, regardless of injury or anything else. Defensive back scares me a little bit. You lose 5 safeties. I think they're high on Caleb Spencer. I think the transfer from the Roberts kid from Iowa is going to help in a variety of roles. He's going to be that guy that's was supposed to fill that role that Al Blades was supposed to play this year. I think this team is well in position to have a floor of 8 wins. I don't think we're going to see a 5-7 type season. I'm not predicting 10 wins or anything along those lines like we did last year where we were in that honeymoon phase with Mario. But I think it's good enough. I think it's good enough, and I think that Mario is fixing a lot of the issues in this program that he saw in the first year, and I think he deserves credit for that. He deserves credit for seeing issues that happened and going out and addressing those issues, getting rid of people that he didn't think were like that. Because people want to talk about Frank Ponce being brought in on a homeboy role, right? But from everything I'm hearing is that Mario told him, listen, man, you're not in a position to be calling plays here at the University of Miami. That if you have another opportunity somewhere else, go take that opportunity because it won't be here at the University of Miami based on what we saw last season. And there was that, from what I heard, there was that heart-to-heart conversation between Mario and Frank Ponce, which I have to give huge kudos to. That's a guy who he came up through the ranks with, was with him at FIU. They've known each other from their days in South Florida. Mario's doing the things necessary to get this thing right. People have to have patience, and I know we are the least patient fan base in all of college football, in my opinion. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. And Mario has said that it's going to be a process. It's going to be ugly in the first year, and it might hurt a little bit in the second year. But by the time things get right and there is a balance in this program, people are going to worry about the Miami Hurricanes once again.
Okay. Look at Frank. Frank is totally positive, totally in on the Miami Hurricanes. I love it. I love it. Jason Candle got you fired up.
Got me fired up. I love good coaching. I love me. I love good coaching. And I love when somebody is able to bring an aspect to this program that hasn't been around in a long time. I think Rhett Lashley had a little bit of that, and we're starting to see that with what he's doing at SMU. A guy that can command the room, a guy that can come in and demand the respect of his players. And I think Jason Candle's that type of guy. Every time you see somebody talk on Twitter about Jason Candle that's a former player, or you see how his guys interact with him at Toledo, they adore this guy. This guy got Gatorade bats twice last year, right? He won the MAC. He's a good coach. Do I think that he's Nick Saban? No, that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that he's the new Yeah, I'm not saying he's Andy Reid with offensive play calling or something along those lines, but I think that this team they need a 7. They need a 7 to get back into the game. You need that rebound. And I think that Jason Candle will be a guy that can come in for 2 to 3 years, the same way Rhett Lashley came in and was supposed to be a 2 to 3 year option and bounce to another head coaching role. And that would be a good fit. That would be a good fit. And you bring in a guy, maybe like a James Coley, right, who can step into that role immediately after with the same scheme, same verbiage, and keep things pumping.
So he's cut. Let's just say he is going to come in as an offensive coordinator. What do you do about these other position groups, though? Is he going to be like the OC wide receivers coach, just like Josh Gaddis was? Is he going to be an offensive coordinator, QB's coach? Do you bring in another QB's coach? Do you bring in another wide receivers coach? Does this open up a chance for Kevin Beard to come back to South Florida as a wide receivers coach? Do you plug him into that position? Where do you see these other position coaching opportunities playing out with, just say, John Campbell comes through and lights our fire? I'm going to keep coming with those type of ones, by the way.
There we go. A little funny. We're punny today, but I think that I don't think they bring in a wide receivers coach. I know Miami fans want to get excited about potentially Kevin Beard coming back. Homegrown type guy who was here before. He's pretty good recruiter. He's known in South Florida as one of those guys that's very well respected amongst coaches. But I still think that Jason Candle is going to fit that Gaddis role, where he's going to be the play caller, but he's going to coach the receivers. I think that they're going to have to bring in a younger quarterback coach. A guy that I would love for them to bring in would be like a Ryan Williams, who's worked with quarterbacks at the University of Georgia, Stetson Bennett, guys like that. It would be a fit. He's another former homegrown guy that is looking for that opportunity. He could be that guy. Or Toledo, the Toledo quarterback coach. He's another guy that he's under Candle. He knows what he wants to do. He's worked with quarterbacks. They've had success with quarterbacks. Like I said, every year it's a 3,000-yard quarterback or a guy, or they throw for 3,000 yards as a team with two different quarterbacks, or they throw for 300 yards per game in what they did in the COVID season. So I think that there's a few different options there. I don't think the quarterback coach position is going to make or break what this offense does. I think that the communication between the coaches is going to be the most important.
It certainly did break us last season, though, right?
But I think it would have worked better.
A quarterback's coach. I mean, those quarterbacks look broken. And I think that's kind of the main concern going into the season. Yeah, you've got this guy who's kind of focused on ground and pound, but are they going to elevate the level of play of these quarterbacks, which was absolutely abysmal last season?
Yeah, well, just based on his track record, he's done an excellent job with quarterbacks. Just Candle. You can only go based on what somebody's done, right? And I think a huge reason why the quarterbacks looked the way they did last year was because of this dysfunction in the offensive room. When you got a guy who can't come in and even talk to his coaches, that probably means that he can't come into the position group rooms and come talk to the players. There just wasn't that connection. We saw Josh Gaddis a lot last year after games. He was out of it. He was like, he didn't know. He would say at times, right? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. It was a lost cause. Not saying Josh Gaddis isn't a good coach. I think Josh Gaddis is going to go somewhere else and do really well.
I agree.
But there's an issue of communication that was going on at the University of Miami that I think was extending to the quarterbacks. And if you can bring in a guy that can have his players buy in, especially at the quarterback position, the same way TVD did with Rhett Lashley, because they were hip to hip with each other, right? They were lock in step with each other, not just because Rhett Lashley was a quarterback coach, because those players bought in to what he did. The receivers bought into what he did, right? That everybody, you saw a different Xavier Restrepo last year from an enthusiasm standpoint under Rhett Lashley than he did under Josh Gaddis. And Josh Gaddis is coaching the receivers. So even the receivers looked bad last year. So I think if you bring in a guy who can help develop the position group room, whatever he's coaching, and also bring in a guy that communication is there, then you're going to be good.
All right, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a long few months until that first game against Miami of Ohio, Miami versus Miami, which I think is very interesting just in itself because it's going to be a mirror of what this Hurricanes team would potentially be. The other thing I want to talk about is just this weekend. It was a great weekend when it comes to 7-on-7 football, where Football Hotbed put on another great tournament. A lot of great players from that tournament, and the usual is that South Florida Express wins. It's becoming the South Florida Invitational. This particular tournament, the fourth straight year, South Florida Express wins this tournament. Um, we did post a list of primetime players from that tournament. You can see that on canescounty.com. Which players are really kind of stood out to you the most from this tournament?
The easy name to mention, Jeremiah Smith. What a freak of all freaks. 6'4", did everything that he wanted to this weekend, made things happen in short routes, vertical routes. He did it all. And honestly, man, I think that he's overall the best player in South Florida and the country. He was just dominant. He was dominant. A couple other guys we can mention. Jaden Glazer is a guy that we talk about constantly over the course of how this 7-on-7 season has gone. He's been a guy that I don't think many expected to take over the South Florida Express offense, and he did just that. He's been accurate. He's showed zip on the ball. He's really just been a Division I quarterback prospect from how he's been playing. And I love his game. I think he's done really well. Air Nolan, this is the first time you and I really got a chance to see him in person. You know, we've watched a lot of film on him from his time at Langston Hughes, but he looked good. No practice time with this team. Comes down here this weekend and immediately just slots in with Jaden Glazer, and that offense was pumping. They were blowing teams out. The offense was moving really well. Even when the defense struggled, they were boom, 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 score, score, score. And I know it's easy to throw to Josiah Trader and Jeremiah Smith and Chance Robinson and all these guys, right? The farmer kid from Cocoa. But overall, the quarterback has to play well. And we saw other teams in that tournament, right? Quarterback play was the detriment of what they did. And those two quarterbacks came out and did what they needed to do. A couple other guys that I really like, CJ Ewald. CJ Ewald broke on a pick in what seemed like a cover 2 coverage. And he looked really good at corner. Typically, he plays safety in 7-on-7, but it was different this weekend. They really gave him a chance to shine in his Friday night home, and he did what he was supposed to do as a borderline 5-star prospect, and that was be a ball hawk. He had several PBUs, including that really nice INT. He really should have had 2 or 3 interceptions on the day. So his length as just a sophomore, his ball skills, I think he's only going to get better. And I think Miami's going to be going after him really hard, even, despite his commitment to Michigan.
Yeah, I like Jaden Glasser as well. He's a big kid too. He's about 6'2", 200 pounds, and he can move too. If you see his tape, so I really liked him. One of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country. I mean, I would say not just in the state of Florida. He is a guy that is going to be vaulting up recruiting boards. I would say in the next couple of months. And 7-on-7, let's be honest, it's all about the quarterback, really. It's really how good a team is really how great the quarterback play is. For the most part, these receivers are able to, get open for the most part and catch the football. I mean, you may have some DBs as well that will, be locked down. Like for me, the lockdown guy of the weekend for me was Charles Lester. Charles
Bingo.
Lester is the real deal. It's the first time I really got a chance to really kind of watch him exclusively. He is the real deal. Miami, they're kind of behind the eight ball as far as the race is concerned for him. It seems like Florida is really kind of, you know, they're ahead of Miami.
In
I mean, he
Florida
announced
State too.
yeah, he announced the top five, and Miami's not in it. That's basically all you really need to know. And it's a shame because he was by far to me the lockdown corner of the tournament. So he was really impressive to me. And as you said, Aaron Noland, really impressive kid. I had a chance to talk to him. He really likes Miami, though. He really is interested in Miami. I think Miami legitimately has a chance. This 2024 class seems like it's shaping up to be the class of the quarterback because there's so many outstanding 2024 quarterbacks, and a lot of them Miami has some kind of relationship with. Whether it be Sayin, who's committed to Alabama, Michael Van Buren, Nolan, Glasser is obviously very interested in coming back home to play for Miami. So there's going to be a lot of options, definitely for this 2024 class. And just as you said, I mean, South Florida Express has an embarrassment of riches, and you named kind of the main guys, and one of the guys who's probably going to make a lot of noise this season as well is Terrell Short. I mean, he is literally short, but he is a blazer as far as speed is concerned. And just like you said in your story, he's very similar to a Kataris Hicks who got who signed with Louisville Power Five program. So he could potentially be that type of guy. He Last year, South Florida Express kind of had that player in Santana Fleming. Santana Fleming is kind of like more of the guy who's running underneath routes and coming across the middle, just to kind of gain yards and first downs and stuff like that, and can beat you deep as well. So I think he kind of fits into that Santana Fleming role, who signed with Western Carolina and who was also at the UA Under Armour All American game. So uh, those are some of the players that I saw that you didn't mention that kind of really jumped out to me. Lester's definitely the real deal. I like Xavier Brown as well, the kid from Modern Day. He's also interested in Miami, but a lot of other schools are in contention for him as well.
That's it. Yeah, USC's going to be the team to beat there. That's just that connection to Mater Day. It's going to make it
Yeah,
tough. I think that Miami's going to have a shot there, and I think that if you're comparing Lester and Brown, Brown is the more technically ready player to jump in day one and play corner. I think that he's a big ass kid, right? Lester, people have to
yeah,
understand, Lester is a legit 6'2", 185 pound, right? How
absolutely.
we talk about Jeremiah Smith being a absolute unicorn from a size perspective, the same thing can be said about Charles Lester. He could easily finish high school as a 6'3", 200-pound kid. That means that safety could probably be within his future. A guy like a Jalen Ramsey, how Jalen Ramsey has transitioned from corner to just a Minka Fitzpatrick type role is where I could see a Charles Lester playing. If you want him to play corner, he can play corner. But if you want that guy in the action constantly, if you go watch his tape, he is smacking people too. He's not just your typical cover corner. Brown, to
Yeah,
me, is your typical cover corner. Technically sound, really good hips, elite footwork, hand placement at the line of scrimmage is really good, especially for a kid who's still a junior in high school. He is 6'1", 175, 180 pounds as well. I don't see the same physical projection as Charles Lester, but that kid is a long corner that fits the mold of the Damari Browns of the world, right?
yeah,
If you're trying to get bigger at defensive back and longer and more technically sound, something that we really haven't seen. Tyrique Stevenson, we know, is a really good athlete, rumored to run a 4.3 40 at the combine coming up, but he wasn't a technically sound guy. He wasn't a traditional corner by trade. This kid is a corner by trade. He is what you want as a guy that he might not get 6, 7 picks, but he's going to be a guy that has a lot of pass breakups and he's in the right position a whole lot of the time.
And I think Miami actually has a better shot than you may think. He does not want to stay home, from what I heard. From what I gathered from him, he doesn't. He kind of, LA kids are very similar to Miami kids. They kind of want to get out and branch out and go someplace different and always have the place of home to kind of come back to. He's got family in the area, so I think it could be a really good fit. And he's Haitian too. I don't think a lot of people even know that. But yeah, he's Haitian too. Of course, Miami's got a strong Haitian population down here. So I think Miami probably has a better shot than people may think, just because he wants to be in a different environment. So we'll see how all of that kind of plays out. But those were definitely, I think, all of the top guys. Go to canescounty.com to see our list of the top players. One more last thing before I get out of here, because you kind of mentioned it really quickly here, and I was wondering, if we should talk about it. And it's Tyrique Stevenson, man. Tyrique Stevenson showing out at the Senior Bowl practice, really technically sound when you saw him in one-on-ones. We still have the combine to go, so he's still training for that. I think what a lot of people will be like, why didn't he do that for Miami? Or like, why was he giving up 50-yard bombs in that Middle Tennessee State game? I think that's what people will ask. Like, why is it that a player can play at Miami, be average, and then go to the NFL and excel? Which it seems like that is probably what is going to happen with Tyrique Stevenson, whether he plays cornerback or safety. I really kind of believe that, based on what we've seen at the Senior Bowl practice. What do you attest to that? What do you think where do you think he'll fall? I personally think he's going to be like a third round pick. I think that's where he'll probably fall. I don't think he'll fall any later than that. Possibly he could be maybe a first rounder. Who knows if he runs a blazing, 40 time. Definitely a possibility. And but I think if you ask me, his floor maybe a third rounder, high is a first. So I think he falls probably in the middle at second round.
I totally agree with you. I think he's a second round pick. That's just based on that's me thinking, say he runs a 4.40 at the combine, which he probably will. Say he does well under the bench. He's a bigger corner. I think he does well from a strength test perspective. He does a good job with his, just athletic traits, right? Like, he's going to run the 3-cone well. He's going to run a shuttle well. Like, all those things he's going to do well. So I don't think there's going to be any red flags on that. I want to see how he does in just the cornerback drills, right? Where they put him through the position drills. That's going to be the big test to me. I think if he kills that, right, on top of having a really strong Senior Bowl week, he could go end of first round. You spoke to Juwan Dallas. Juwan Dallas, just for some background, is my best friend. That's my guy, right? We do podcasts together and stuff, and he's raved about Tyrique. He said that just physically, he is everything that you want for a defensive back. He thinks that probably he'll end up playing nickel at the next level, but he can play corner. He can play safety if he wanted to. And I think everybody in the NFL probably projects him out as a big athletic nickel that can, cover up slots and then make plays in the run game. And I think that's why he's got such a range, because it's going to depend on scheme, on really where he goes and who falls in love with him. But I would not be surprised to see a team like the Cowboys, right, get enamored by him at the end of the first round when they need some corner help. You want somebody on the outside that's big and athletic, along with Trayvon Diggs, right, who doesn't have to be the man all the time, which I think there were times at the University of Miami where he kind of got thrusted in there as, you got to be that number one guy. You got to be the man. You came from Georgia. right? We promise you that you're going to be a punt returner. You're going to be an outside corner, even though you've never really played it. And there really wasn't that ability to have that adjustment period to the position, just because the expectations were so high. He was coming back home. He was in the national championship game at Georgia. He was starting as a freshman.
Yeah.
I just don't think he really got a chance. And I think that's the problem with a lot of guys that come to the University of Miami. The expectations are so high and they're thrust in right away without really getting a chance to acclimate. And there's a lot of dysfunction on this coaching staff on a year-to-year basis. Right? Like, could we be talking about a change in defensive back coach position next year? Absolutely. That is not outside the realm of possibility, right? So you can't blame it all on the kids. Sometimes the development has to come from the coaches. And I know that the kids have to put in the work and they have to take in the coaching. But a lot of the times, our coaches are not doing what it need, the necessary things to get those guys to that next level. So I'm happy to see him succeeding in this offseason. I'm excited to see what he does at the combine. I think he slots in probably second round.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited to see Tyrique. Tyrique is a kid that I've been covering since he was a little kid. He's always at Football Hotbed tournaments, which is a company I used to work for. I mean, at times he was the most dynamic athlete in all of South Florida, which is saying a lot. So really excited for him and his career, and we'll see where he ends up. But that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Once again, I'm Marcus Benjamin. He's Frank Tucker, representing the Crib, South Florida, bringing you all kinds of news from South Florida and recruiting. And make sure you follow us on this YouTube channel, Storm Tracker Podcast, on all platforms that you get your podcast, as well as follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Until the next episode.